Internal Revenue Service IRS Tax News. VA SSI recipients with eligible children need to act by Tuesday, May 5th to quickly add money to their automatic economic impact payment plus 500 push continues. May 5th deadline for VA SSI recipients who don't file a tax return and have dependents. IR 2020-86, May 1st, 2020, Washington. The Internal Revenue Service today reminded Supplemental Security Income and Department of Veteran Affairs beneficiaries to act by Tuesday, May 5th if they don't file a tax return in 2018 or 2019 and have dependents so they can quickly receive the full amount of their economic impact payment. So in other words, if you're getting payments from VA payments or SSI payments, then and you don't file a tax return. So you don't file 2018 tax return, you don't file 2019 tax return. Why? Because you don't have to, because your income's under a certain limit to do so. So you're not required to file the tax return, in part because you're getting benefits that possibly are not taxable. And you're getting these benefits. If you're getting these benefits, then you shouldn't have to do anything for the IRS to know who you are, because the IRS can work with these institutions and know who you are and process the economic impact payment. So you should be okay, nothing needed to be done. However, if you do have a situation that the IRS doesn't know about that will affect the economic impact payment, such as a qualifying child that could add the 500, and hence the plus 500 push they're talking about, then you'd have to use a tool in order to give them that information to get that added 500. And that would need to be done by May 5th. So in general, if you file 2018, 2019 tax returns, you're okay. If you're not required to file those tax returns and you got payments from VA SSI recipients, then you should still be okay if it's just you. You're going to get the $1,200 payment. However, if you have a qualifying child under the 17, that's the situation that they're concerned with now. That's the deadline they're looking at, May 5th. They need that information by May 5th to get that added 500 before the checks are processed. If after May 5th the checks are processed, you get a check for $12,500, but it should have been up by 500 or more per qualifying child, you can't do anything until you actually file the tax return at that point. Or in other words, you can't use the special tools that they have right now to kind of make it an easy, quicker type of payment. You're going to have to actually file the tax return for 2020. So you want it. That's why they're pressing this May 5th deadline, in essence. Back to the text. Their $1,200 payment will be issued soon, and in order to add the $500 per eligible child amount to these payments, the IRS needs the dependent information before the payments are issued. Otherwise, their payment at this time will be $1,200, and by law, the additional $500 per eligible child amount will be paid in association with a return filing for tax year 2020. So in other words, if you don't do it, if you don't get this in by May 5th, it's not the end of the world. You can still get access to the $500 per eligible child. However, it's not as easy to do. I mean, if you don't file a tax return in general, then you're going to have to file a tax return, which is something you don't typically do. And this tool will be easier to use than the tax return generally, because they're just asking for this information specifically, and you're going to have to file it for 2020, which of course you're not going to get as soon. So just note that if you wait past the May 5th and the payment gets processed or gets scheduled to be processed at that point, then it's too late to use the tool. You can still have access to the 500, but it's not going to happen till later, until you do the 2020 tax return, and you'll have to file the tax return. Quote, back to the text, quote, "The deadline is quickly approaching for these groups so they can get their maximum economic impact payment of $1,200 and $500 for each eligible child as quickly as possible," end quote, said IRS Commissioner Chuck Reddick. Quote, "These groups will get $1,200 automatically, but they need to act quickly and use the non-filer tool on irs.gov to get the extra $500 per child added to their payment. Everyone should share this information widely and help others with the plus 500 push so that more Americans can get more money as fast as possible," end quote. Following extensive work by the IRS and partner government agencies, $1,200 economic payments will be starting soon for those receiving Social Security retirement, survivor, or disability benefits SSDI, railroad retirement benefits, supplemental security income SSI, and VA compensation and pension C&P beneficiaries who don't file a tax return in the last 2 years. No action is needed by these groups to automatically receive their $1,200 payment. So again, in general, if you didn't file the tax return 2018, 2019, because you're not required to and you receive payment from these institutions, the payments will be going out, but the payment will be for the base amount, that $1,200. If that amount is the proper amount, then everything is good because they have the information to process that. It's only if that amount is incorrect for something, for example, if there's a qualifying child, where there could be a problem, because that's the information the IRS wouldn't have. Back to the text. For VA and SSI recipients who have a qualifying child and didn't file a 2018 or 2019 return, they have a limited window to register to have a $500 per child added automatically to their soon-to-be received $1,200 economic impact payment. So if you didn't file 2018, 2019, you're in the situation where you have a qualifying child, you get VA and SSI or SSI, then you'll get the $1,200, but in order to get the added $500 per qualifying child, the IRS would need that information. This tool would be necessary before the deadline, Tuesday, May 5th, to get it. Back to the text. Well, you could get it later, but you'd have to file the tax return. But to get it sooner, and then you'd want the tool. Back to the text. A quick trip to the special non-filers tool. There's a link to that here on irs.gov by Tuesday, May 5th. For these groups may help put all their eligible economic impact payment into a single payment. The non-filers tool is available in English and Spanish to help spread the word to recipients with children about this special, quote, plus 500 push, end quote. The IRS has additional material available on a special partner page, there's a link to that here, that can be shared with friends, family members, and community groups. SSI and VA recipients have a child but don't file a tax return? Visit the IRS.gov now. SSI and VA recipients who have children and who weren't required to file a tax return in 2018 or 2019 should visit the Non-Filers Interpayment Info Here tool on IRS.gov. By quickly taking these steps to enter information on the IRS website about them and their qualifying children, they can receive the $500 per dependent child payment automatically in addition to their $1,200 individual payment. Otherwise, their payment at this time will be $1,200, and by law, the additional $500 per eligible child amount would be paid in association with a return filing for tax year 2020. SSI and VA recipients who receive compensation and pension C&P benefits payments should receive their automatic payments by mid-May. If they have children and aren't required to file a tax return, both groups are urged to use the non-filer tools as soon as possible before May 5th deadline. Once the deadline passes and processing begins on the $1,200 payment, they will not be eligible to use the non-filer tool. So it stops at that point in time. If you go after that point in time, and again, it makes sense that you might say, hey, look, they gave me a payment and the payment's wrong because I have a qualifying child and they got this tool. Why can't I just file the tool and then you just send me the extra $500 per qualifying child? That kind of makes sense, but they're saying that's not how it's going to work here. So once the deadline passes, the tool's gone, it goes away, and the only way to get the added plus 500 is to file an actual tax return, and that's not going to happen. That's 2020. So that's going to take some time, and again, it's going to be more information. So that's why they're pushing up to this point for this deadline. Back to the text. Their payment will be $1,200 by law. The additional $500 per eligible child amount would be paid in association with a return filing for tax year 2020. SSA Railroad retirees economic impact payments started arriving this week. For recipients of Social Security, retirement, survivors, or disability insurance benefits, SSDI, and Railroad Retirement Benefits, RRB, automatic payments of $1,200 began arriving this week. No action is needed on their part. This includes people who don't normally file a tax return. For Social Security, RRB beneficiaries who don't normally file a tax return, have a child, and registered using the IRS non-filers tool by April 22nd deadline. More payments are arriving this week as well. For SSA RRB beneficiaries who don't normally file a tax return and have a child but did not register on the IRS non-filers tool by April 22nd, they still are receiving their automatic $1,200 starting this week. So again, if for the people that already, the deadline already passed for them, for SSA and RRB beneficiaries, and I've gotten some questions on this, right? If they got a payment of $1,200 and it wasn't included, the qualifying child wasn't included, then it's past the deadline for those payments because they already went out. So the non-filer tool typically wouldn't be of use to them at this point, and they got the $1,200 and get any added information they would need to file the tax return for 2020. Back to the text. Given the deadline has passed, by law, the additional $500 per eligible child amount would be paid in association with filing a tax return for 2020. This group can no longer use the non-filer tool to add eligible children. Note, Direct Express account holders, you may use the non-filer tool, but you cannot receive your and your children's payment on your Direct Express account. You may only select a bank account for direct deposit or leave bank information blank and receive the money by mail. No action needed by most taxpayers. The Treasury Department will make these automatic payments to SSA, SSI, RRB, and VA recipients. Recipients will generally receive automatic $1,200 payments by direct deposit, Direct Express debit card, or by paper check, just as they would normally receive their benefits. So in other words, most of the time, in general, if you're not filing your tax return, but you're working with or you have payments from these institutions, the IRS knows who you are. They'll process the standard payment of $1,200 economic impact payment, you typically in the same way, the same fashion as you're receiving payments from these institutions, no problem. So most people are okay. It's only those people that have that added information that would affect the $1,200 base amount, such as a qualifying child, where, these deadlines fall into place and these added tools, fall into play. Back to the text. For more information related to veterans and their beneficiaries who receive compensation and pension C&P benefit payments from VA, please visit va.gov. There's a link to that here. General IRS information about the economic impact payment is available on a special section of irs.gov website. There's a link to that here. Watch out for scams related to economic impact payments. The IRS urges taxpayers to be on the lookout for scams related to economic impact payments. There is no fee required to receive these payments. So if someone's charging a fee for something like that, or any kind of email, any kind of phone call, text message, text message, these are not typical ways that the IRS is going to contact you at all. And if there's any urgency saying we need your information now, that's usually kind of a scammy type of thing. So I would resist the urge to say, I got to take care of this right now and get back to any kind of messaging on that, and rather instead go directly to the IRS website, ignore the message, or just go directly to the IRS website rather than responding to it, and look from the source to that information. A lot of payments going out from the IRS and whatnot at this time. That means phishing scams, all kinds of scams are going to go up.